When creating a database, and specifically more a database table, you have to understand the differences between different keys. Before we look at the keys, I want you to take a look at the more formal names used in a database. In Access, we refer to a table, rows, and fields, or records and columns. But more formal names are in a database is a relation. So if you're reading a book or looking something and it's talking about a relation, what it's really talking about is a database table. A more formal name for a record or row is a tuple, and a more formal name for a field or a column is an attribute. So if I'm taking a look at my table or relations characteristics, we have to recognize that each row is unique. And it's unique because we've set up a primary key, and that will make every single record unique from any other record. It doesn't matter what order your records or your columns or rows are in. By default, the primary key creates the initial sort order, but you can sort the records by any column or any row. Each entry into a column or a field has to be a single value. Don't create a field called name and put in a person's last name, middle initial, first name. You want to have a single field for each one. So you want a column or field for last name, a column or field for middle initial, a column or name or field for first name. Each field name has to be unique. You're not going to call a field name, name, name. It has to be uniquely identified. Last name, first name, middle initial. All entries in a field are from the same domain. Now, realize a domain, what you're doing here for a domain is you're pulling out the values from that field from a set of values. For example, if we have the field last name, the domain can be very broad. It can include such things as all legitimate last names of people. However, if you have like a course number, and the course numbers are limited to a value of 100 to 199, then the domain for that field of course numbers is 100 to 199. So that's what a domain is, a set of values from which you're drawing your actual value. Lastly, though, each row describes an entity. And an entity is simply a person, place, object, event, or idea. So if I have my hack student table, each row describes each particular student. If I have a course table, each row describes the particular information about each individual course. Now, let's talk about the difference with keys. We have the primary key, and that is going to uniquely identify every record. We have candidate keys. We have alternate keys. We have composite or concatenate keys. We have foreign keys, and we have what are called non-key attributes. Okay, let's take a look at each one. Your primary key. You're going to create a primary key to make sure that each row or record is unique. The primary key should be minimal, so it shouldn't contain a whole lot of unnecessary data, and it should not change in value. When you create your table, you're going to set up a listing of fields and a little bit of records. And what you're going to do is determine a candidate key. And a candidate key is a field or a column that could serve as a primary key. In a table, you may have several candidate keys. What you're going to do is list the candidate keys, and then from those candidate keys, pick one field to become the primary key. And once you pick that primary key, all the other candidate keys become an alternate key. So let's take a look at an example. Here I have the state table that has the field called state abbreviation, state name, the entered union order, state bird, and state population. And I have a little bit of data in each of this table. So we want to first determine, and this is what you will be doing when you're creating your tables. You want to first determine what fields could possibly be the primary key. In other words, what fields could be the candidate key. If I take a look at state bird, I know that that cannot be a candidate key because look, the state of Tennessee and Texas have a mockingbird as their state bird, so that's not, couldn't possibly be unique. If I take a look at state population, yes, the values here are unique. However, they do change, and they could change and possibly make it not be unique. So state population, because it is a changing value, and it also can't define it as being unique, it could not be a candidate key. All right, if I take a look at entered union order, these are each state entered the union in a different order. So yes, that could be a candidate key. I could look at state name. Every state name is unique. That could be a candidate key. It could be a primary key, so I'm going to use that as a candidate key. And then my state abbreviation. Each one of those are unique. That could be a candidate key. So my candidate keys in this state table are state abbreviation, state name, and the entered union order. Now, you have to determine which one of these three candidate keys would best serve as the primary key. Now remember, one of the requirements for primary key is minimal. So you really want at minimal and makes sense in usage. So out of all three of these, the one that stands out to be the most logical is the state abbreviation. Once you pick your primary key, the other candidate keys become your alternate keys. So to reiterate or summarize, the candidate keys for these would be state abbreviation, state name, and entered union order because they're all unique. I would pick state abbreviation because it's the minimal most. And then my state name and entered union order become alternate keys. Okay. What happens if when you have a table, you don't have any candidate keys? None of the fields in your table are unique. When there are no candidate keys, what you have to do is take two or more fields and combine them to make a primary key, which is then be called your composite or concatenate key. Again, you want to take these fields to make sure they're unique and that they're minimal. And it's always going to be a multiple column primary key, composite or concatenate key. You also want to identify a foreign key, and this is where a field from one table must match the value of the primary key of another table. And you use this field, these common fields, the primary key field and the foreign key, in order to create relationships. Your foreign key cannot be null. Let's take a look at a table in which we have no candidate keys. If you take a look at state abbreviation, we do not have any unique values. If you take a look at city name, we have the word Portland twice. Okay, so that's not going to be a unique. That cannot be a primary key. And the state population is a changing value and it could not be unique, even though in this example it does look like a unique value. So what we want to do is we want to take the state abbreviation and the city name, combine the two to create a composite concatenate primary key. If you also recognize this state abbreviation is a foreign key to the state table that we looked at previously. One last thing we have to look at in keys are what are called your non-key fields. And a non-key field is any field that is not part of the primary key. So for example, if I went back to my state table, I made state abbreviation my primary key. All the other fields are non-key fields. And city population, I had to create a composite or concatenate key. So my state abbreviation city name is that. My non-key field is the city population field. Now, when you're creating your own database, you want to create a small table, list your fields, and put some data into it. Your first step then is to look at the data in there, look at your fields, and determine your candidate keys. Once you have your candidate keys, select your primary key. The primary key, make it the most minimal, should contain the most minimal data possible. Once you select the primary keys, the other candidate keys then become your alternate keys. If you have no candidate keys, so if you say none for candidate keys, then you don't have a primary key per se as a single field. You have to create a composite concatenate field by combining two or more columns. And then any field that is not either a primary key or your composite concatenate key then becomes your non-key fields. Your last step then is to determine foreign keys in the table so that you can link the tables together. And this is a key concept when creating your own database.